Welcome to our Extra with Life Point episodes. I am here with Pastor Reverend Andrew Milner,
Whoa.
Papa Milner, all the
love
nicknames.
Reverend's incredible.
You like that?
Yeah, I think you should call me that more often.
I felt good about that. I put that in my notes. It was,
Yeah. Write that one down.
Very intentional.
Yeah, I'll make sure change my contact in your phone too.
Speaking of nicknames, what nicknames do you not like?
Pretty much all of them. It's so funny. My entire life I've been Andrew, right? That's what I've always gone by in school, like growing up. And then I started working here, and I started working underneath Pastor Doug Line, who requires to give everybody a nickname.
Oh yeah.
And he calls me Drew or Drewbins, and it drives me up a wall.
Yeah, dude. That's
so
literally how
Doug,
I know
if
you.
you're watching this is my public confession to you. And if you're not Doug and you're watching this, please don't call me Drew or Drewbins.
Yeah. I don't even know if he knows how to access podcasts, but
I might have to send this one to him.
I know Jamie watches. Anyway, so let's get started. So you just got done preaching at our Marysville location, and now we get to unpack, get a little bit extra from your sermon. And we're in a series right now.
Called The Way of Jesus.
Can we restart? I'm sorry.
This is the first time we've gotten to do this together, man.
Dang it. I didn't know the series name. Okay. Well, let's just dive right in. We're in a series called The Way of Jesus, and you just got done preaching at our Marysville location. And we just get to ask you some questions. But before we do that, I have something fun.
Okay.
I'm very excited because I want to know your answer to this.
Okay.
If you could have dinner with any three people, living or dead, who would they be and why?
It's a great question.
I know it is. Thank you, ChatGPT.
I love that. This is the super cliche, like Christian answer. So obviously Jesus Christ, like super cliche. If we want to, we could take him off the table. Like that's number one.
Okay.
The Apostle Paul, truthfully. Let's see who else. I don't know. Probably some like athlete. I'm a big sports guy. I'm trying to think who would be like. Oh, probably. Like one of my favorite baseball players growing up was Ichiro Suzuki for the Seattle Mariners. And everything that I've heard about him is he's like the most like regimented, detail-oriented, routine-based like person ever. I just want to get like all of his secrets on life. He's like super successful. I'm like, I want to learn from that guy.
Yeah.
And another one, honestly, again, he's someone who has had a lot of influence in my life over especially the last couple of years. And he's, he's the one who's created Practicing Light, but John Mark Comer, he's like the man right now.
Yeah.
And so just getting to pick some of those guys' brains on life and leadership and marriage and what it means to be a follower of Jesus.
Yeah. What a table.
I know.
You would have Paul, Ichiro, John Mark Comer, and Jesus just hovering over.
Yeah. Don't forget me. I would be there too.
Yeah, you would be there, but you'd be sitting at the kids' table.
The least, I would be sitting at the kids' table.
So let's just jump right in. This whole, Sunday was kind of focusing on like becoming like Jesus.
Yeah.
And in your message, you touched on the idea that we have, for us, many personalities and things just kind of going, at us from all sides. How can someone begin to identify which self to nurture, and how does this relate to our identity in Christ?
That's so good.
I know.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I was kind of touching on this idea, and like the Apostle Paul, he talks about like taking away the old self and replacing it with a new self. And what's actually really interesting is that like a lot of my modern psychology is actually leaning into this idea that there is like multiple desires within us, or multiple selves, for lack of a better term, which was really interesting. But I'm like, as I was reading this, I was like, dude, that totally makes sense when I'm thinking about my life. And I'm like, man, there's the Andrew who wants to like wake up and eat super healthy and go to the gym and just be like super detail oriented. And then there's the Andrew who's like lazy and doesn't want to go to the gym and wants to show up late to work and leave early. And so like navigating that tension. But I think for someone who is like, where do I lean in? I think one of the things that God has given all humans is like this general compass of like what's right and wrong, right? And God, he's the center of truth, the center of morality, what is good, what is right, what is noble. And so I believe that like if we lean into the things that even if no matter how far away you are from Christ, whether you're a Christ follower or not, like we all have this idea of what is good and what is right. And so beginning to lean into those things of, hey, God desires me to be less angry at my spouse, right? And again, whether or not you're a Christ follower, we all have that idea of like, hey, I should probably be nicer to my spouse.
Yeah.
And the more that you begin to do that, right, the more that you just start to lean into those right decisions and the good, for lack of a better term, like you can just start to see God show up and work in and through that, just as the center of truth.
Yeah. Where do you think like the role of community kind of plays in when it comes to that? Because, you know, for me at least, you know, it's like the whole multiple like personalities and just like putting your best foot forward. Like for me, I relate like, you know, I want to wake up early and read my Bible all the time because I know that I'm going to be a more likable person throughout the day when I do that.
Yeah.
But more often than not, I don't do that.
Yeah.
And how would you encourage somebody that maybe in the lens of just like community and how community helps with that? Like, has that been something in your life?
Yeah, it's been super helpful for me. Again, like I have a small group that I meet with every Wednesday morning. And it's kind of funny. Like I lead the group, like, and I'll put that in air quotes because it's like, yeah, I organize like what we're going to be talking about.
Right.
I'm the youngest person at that table by at least like 10 years. But I love showing up there every single week because what they do is they just like, they pour into me. We just get to sit there and we just get to talk about God's word. And I get to learn from these guys who are in a season or two or even multiple seasons ahead of me of where I want to be, whether they have young kids or they have teenagers or they're empty nesters. And I'm just getting to learn from them. Yeah. Like it's helped me become a better husband as I'm just navigating what it means to be married, right? I've been married for 8 months and just getting to learn from guys who've been married for 30, 40 years of like what it means to continue to love your spouse, even when it's hard. Like they have a lot more wisdom on that than I do. And so getting to learn from that, or some of these guys who know the Bible inside and out and just know the truths of what the Bible has to say about my life and our life. And so like, I think community is so, so important and so crucial. And it's one of those where I relate it to CrossFit and why CrossFit's gotten so popular over the last 10 years. And I know I don't do CrossFit, but I know you do. And it
super
shows.
ripped.
Yeah, you're in a lot better shape than I am.
I know.
But like the idea of having people around you to encourage you, motivate you, and hold you accountable. I know that like if you sign up for a CrossFit class and you don't show up, like you're getting a call from Mitch.
Oh, I got a text message this last week like, hey bro, missing you. Wish you would come in.
Yeah.
I'm like, gosh, dang it, Mitch.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's like, and it's like, yeah, it can be frustrating. But it's like super good and motivating for us as well to like encourage ourselves. And like, I think the two things that community can really do is number one, like it exposes us, which is scary. Like the idea of just being exposed, being vulnerable to people, and like true authentic community. It means that you're going to hand over parts of you to someone that they could hurt you with. And so sometimes like unhealthy community can be really, really painful. But in that vulnerability and in that exposure, there's a lot of healing. There's a lot of growth that you can see. And then through that, there's encouragement. So community exposes and encourages. And in that encouragement, it's just cheering you on of, hey, this is where you can go, right? Again, when you're talking about, just going back to the CrossFit example, if you're talking about like, hey, this is what you can achieve if you continue in this. And this is where you've already been. Like you showed up here a year ago and this is what you were struggling with and look at where you are now. Right. So I just love the idea of just community being able to show you how far you've come and how much farther you still have to go. And encouraging you along that path and just exposing the areas that we need growth in. And we all do. Again, none of us are perfect. And we need people to push us and encourage us to grow in those seasons and grow in those areas.
Definitely. And like iron sharpens iron. Like we
100%.
need those people. And it's, it can be hard, especially like when you talked about like just how vulnerability, like, people can use that against you. And a lot of people maybe listening right now have been hurt by people that they put trust in. And so it's like, I ain't open up again. Like, heck no. Like, but then, it's just looking at like the fuller picture of just like, this is what God has designed though in community.
Yeah.
And also how like God protects you in that time. Like, even though you had to go through that and experience that hurt, like I have experienced that with certain relationships in my life, but how God like preserves you through that.
Yeah.
And, but it's so beautiful when you have those people in your life. 'Cause then it's like, yeah, I know that Alexia was going to call me out when I'm acting like an idiot.
Yeah.
And, I should probably apologize to my wife. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need a bunch of yes men in your life.
No, you need people that are going to hold you accountable. I think it's so true. And it's something that's so necessary for all of us as we're just navigating life.
Last question here for you. So you talked about like this idea of overcoming a closed mind. And you mentioned that a closed mind can prevent growth.
Yeah.
What practical steps can individuals take to remain open to God's teaching, especially if they've had past negative experiences with faith or the church? Like, how does a person push past that and not have that like closed mind towards God?
Yeah. Well, I think that's like, it's hard.
Yeah.
Again, like
super hard.
As we were talking earlier about community, like the church is run by imperfect people, and unfortunately, imperfect people hurt people at times, right? And so I know for myself, and I know for you as well, it's like we have previous church hurt, and like that can certainly like close people off to the idea of God, right? But I think what's beautiful and what's shown throughout the Gospels as well is that God utilizes imperfect people to build His church, and part of just like when you have a closed mind or a hardened heart, I think one of the biggest things it takes is time. It's just like continuing to show up. It's like, hey, it may not click for you the first time that you show up on a Sunday morning, or the first time that you show up to a small group, or the first time that you show up to serve. Like, it may not click for the very first time. It may take 10, 20, 30 times just showing up.
Yeah.
But I know that as you show up, like God will slowly begin to chip away at the things that you just kind of hold in your heart. That's sort of like that bitterness, that resentfulness that I know even I am still working through from like previous experiences. And I think it also takes, like, truthfully, I hate going back to like the same idea, but like it takes community being around you, right? Like I know another 100%. One for me, like when you're talking about dealing with the closed mind, is having other people who again have been there and who are now sitting on the other side of, oh, like, wow, when I was sitting in that closed off like perspective, like I was really bitter and I was frustrated and I treated people really poorly. And now I'm on the other side of that where I experience the joys of life and I experience the fruit of life. Because I know a lot of people, and myself included, when I've had a closed mind, like I'm really bitter, I'm really frustrated, I'm really angry, I don't enjoy parts of life, and it takes people saying like, hey, there's more to life than this, and I think it's the life that Jesus has called us to. Is like, hey, there's more to life than what we just like deem as our day to day, and I love that. It was one of the things that I touched on. I was reading through the Sermon on the Mount, and it's so funny because I think Jesus, like we can read Jesus's teaching and you're like, man, he sets such a high bar for us. Like you read the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus is like, hey, don't be angry, or don't be, the one that I go back to is like, hey, he says, hey, don't worry. Like, don't be stressed out. And I'm like, dude, what do you mean? I'm stressed all the time. Like, Jesus, how do you expect me to do this? Right. But in those teachings, what Jesus assumes is that like, hey, yeah, you're going to be worried and you're going to be frustrated and you're going to fight with your spouse and you're going to judge other people. And he like assumes that we're human. And he also says there's a better way for you. Right. And he opens and closes the Sermon on the Mount by saying, hey, put these words into practice. It takes time to work past the anger, the bitterness, the frustration, the anxiety, the things in our life that just sort of have a place in our heart that we just sort of sit in. And he says that like, if you slowly work on those things, like, and you slowly put these things into practice, like you will become more like me. And I think that's the forever pursuit of becoming like Jesus. And what's beautiful is that as long as we say yes to him, like we get to spend forever pursuing him and trying to become more and more like him every single day. And like, I just think that's so incredible that he gave us that gift and that opportunity.
No, it is a gift. And it's so funny too, cause it's so simple and it's not really that, overcomplicated thing. Like I talk to our youth students about this, like, and laying out a couple of similar things to you're talking about, but this idea of community, and I'm talking to them and I could see them like looking at it and thinking through it, and like, this is kind of elementary. Like what you're saying to us is like, it sounds like you're talking to little kids. I'm like, the truth is God's way, it's not that complicated. We just complicate it.
Yeah, it is. Well, and it's so funny. I was literally talking with someone in my small group this week. And we were just talking about, he's like, hey, these are some of the things that like this group has done for me. Mm-hmm. And one of the things it was so interesting. He was like, he was like, the difference between me now and me 5 years ago was I didn't know what grace was. He's like, I grew up in the church. I heard the word, but I never knew what that meant for me.
Yeah.
And how little we have to play in this. Yeah. Right. And don't get me wrong, like there's an element that we get to play in our spiritual formation and becoming like Jesus. And I love the quote from St. Augustine that it's, without God, we cannot, but without us, God will not. Mm-hmm. Right. Like there's a part that we get to play. And I think it's a gift that we actually get to play in that. Yeah. That God isn't some dictator that doesn't give us a choice, right, but that he has given us free will to choose and to make that decision to love after him. Yeah. And just understanding that grace, it's a beautiful gift, but it can be so hard for us to understand because it's like, no, there's got to be more to it than that. Mm-hmm. But it's super simple. Jesus has done the heavy lifting. Yep. We just get to show up and learn from him and slowly start to implement the things that he's taught us to. And if we do that in community, like we'll see real change in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Andrew, for hanging out with us, giving us a little bit extra. We appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Awesome. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our Extra with LifePoint episodes.